Chapter 7. Self-enquiry. On hearing the expression self-enquiry, atma-vichara, people generally take it to mean either inquiring into self or inquiring about self. But how to do so? Who is to inquire into self? Or who is to inquire about self? What does inquiry actually mean? Such questions naturally arise, do they not? As soon as we hear the terms atma-vichara or brahma-vichara, many of us naturally consider that there is some sort of effulgence or a formless power within our body and that we are going to find out what it is, where it is, and how it is. This idea is not correct because self, Atman, does not exist as an object to be known by us who seek to know it. Since self shines as the very nature of him who tries to know it, self-inquiry does not mean inquiring into a second or third-person object. It is in order to make us understand this from the very beginning that Bhagavan Ramana named self-inquiry as "Who am I?" thus drawing our attention directly to the first person. In this question, "Who am I am" denotes self, and "who" stands for the inquiry. Who is it that is to inquire into self? For whom is this inquiry necessary? Is it for self? No, since self is the ever-attained, ever-pure, ever-free, and ever-blissful whole. It will not do any inquiry, nor does it need to. All right, then, it is only the ego that needs to do the inquiry. Can this ego know self? As said in the previous chapters, this ego is a false appearance, having no existence of its own. It is a petty infinitesimal feeling of I, which subsides and loses its form in sleep. So, can self become an object that could be known by the ego? No, the ego cannot know self. Thus, when it turns out that self-inquiry is unnecessary for self and self-knowledge is impossible for the ego, the questions arise. What, then, is the practical method of doing self-inquiry? Why is this term self-inquiry found in the Shastras? Are we not to scrutinize thus and find out? Let us do so. There is a difference between the sense in which the term inquiry is used by Sri Bhagavan and the way in which the Shastras use it. The Shastras advocate negating the five sheaths, namely the body, prana, mind, intellect, and the darkness of ignorance, as not I, neti neti. But who is to negate them, and how? If the mind or the intellect is to negate them, it can at best negate only the insentient physical body and the prana, which are objects seen by it. Beyond this, how can the mind negate itself, its own form? And when it cannot even negate itself, how can it negate the other two sheaths? The intellect, vijnana maya kosa, and the darkness of ignorance, ananda maya kosa, which are beyond its range of perception. During the time of inquiry, therefore, what more can the mind do to remain as self except to repeat mentally, I am not this body, I am not this prana. From this it is clear that inquiry is not a process of one thing inquiring about another thing. That is why the inquiry, who am I, taught by Sri Bhagavan should be taken to mean self-attention. That is, attention merely to the first person, the feeling I. The nature of the mind is to attend always to things other than itself. That is, to know only second and third persons. If the mind in this way attends to a thing It means that it is clinging, attaching itself to that thing. Attention itself is attachment. Since the mind is to think about the body and prana, though with the intention of deciding this is not, such attention is only a means of becoming attached to them, and it cannot be a means of negating them. This is what is experienced by any true aspirant in his practice. Then, what is the secret hidden in this? Since whether we know it or not, self, which is now wrongly considered by us to be unknown, is verily our reality. The very nature of the Supreme Self's attention itself is grace, anugraha. This means that whatever thing we attend to, witness, observe, or look at, that thing is nourished and will flourish, being blessed by grace. Though one now thinks that one is an individual soul, since one's power of attention is in fact nothing but a reflection of the knowing power, chit shakti, of self. That on which it falls or is fixed is nourished by grace and flourishes more and more. Hence, when the power of attention of the mind is directed more and more towards second and third person objects, both the strength, kriya bala, to attend to those objects and the ignorance, the 5 sense knowledges in the form of thoughts about them, will grow more and more and will never subside. Have we not already said that all our thoughts are nothing but attention paid to second and third person objects? Accordingly, the more we attend to the mind, the thoughts which are the forms, the second and third person objects of the world, the more they will multiply and be nourished. This is indeed an obstacle. The more our attention, the glance of grace, anugraha drishti, falls on it, the more the mind's wavering nature and its ascendancy will increase. That is why it is impossible for the mind to negate anything by thinking, I am not this, neti neti. On the other hand, if our self's attention is directed only towards ourself, our knowledge of our existence alone is nourished. And since the mind is not attended to, it is deprived of its strength, the support of our grace. Without use, when left to stay, iron and mischief rust away. In accordance with this Tamil proverb, since they are not attended to, all the vasana seeds, whose nature is to rise and stealthily and mischievously, have to stay quiet. And thus they dry up like seeds deprived of water and become too weak to sprout out into thought plants. Then, when the fire of self-knowledge, jnana, blazes forth, these tendencies, vasanas, like well-dried firewood, become a prey to it. This alone is how the total destruction of all tendencies, vasanakshaya, is effected. If we are told, abandon the East, the practical way of doing so would be to do as if told, go to the West. In the same manner, when we are told, discard the 5 sheaths, which are not self, the practical way of discarding the non-self is to focus our attention on ourself. What is this I? Or who am I? Thinking I am not this, neti neti, is a negative method. Knowing that this negative method is just as impractical as saying, drink the medicine without thinking of a monkey. Sri Bhagavan has now shown us the practical way of drinking the medicine without thinking of a monkey by giving us the clue. Drink the medicine while thinking of an elephant. That is, he has reformed the ancient negative method by giving us the positive method, who am I? Verily, the ego is all, hence the inquiry, what is it? In other words, who am I? This ego is the true giving up renunciation of all. Thus should you know. Uladu Narpadu, verse 28. Verily all, that is, the five sheaths and their projections, all these worlds, is the ego. So attending to the feeling I, what is it, or who is this I, alone is renouncing the five sheaths, discarding them, eliminating them, or negating them. Thus Bhagavan Ramana has declared categorically that self-attention alone is the correct technique of eliminating the five sheaths. Since this is so, with what purpose did the Shastras use the term inquiry to denote the method neti-neti? By means of neti-neti can we formulate intellectually, that is, through paroksha, the test which we have given in paragraph 4 of chapter 4 of this book. A thing is surely not I, if it is possible for one to experience I am even in the absence of that thing. So long as there exists the wrong knowledge, I am the body, pertaining to the aforesaid five sheaths or three bodies, will not one's paying attention towards the first person automatically be only an attention towards a sheath or a body, a second person? But if we use this test, can we not find out that all such attentions are not the proper first person attention? Therefore, it is necessary, first of all, to have an intellectual conviction that these are not I, in order to practice self-attention without losing our bearings. It is only the discrimination by which we acquire this conviction that has been termed inquiry by the Shastras. What then is an aspirant to do after discriminating thus? How can the attention to these five sheaths, even though with an intention to eliminate them, be an attention to self? Therefore, while practicing self-inquiry, instead of taking any one of the five sheaths as the object of our attention, we should fix our attention only on the I consciousness, which exists and shines as oneself, as the singular, and as a witness to and aloof from these sheaths. Instead of being directed towards any second or third person, is not our power of attention, which was hitherto called mind or intellect, thus now directed only towards the first person? Although we formally refer to this as directed, in truth it is not of the nature of a doing, kriya rupam, in the form of directing or being directed. It is of the nature of being or existing, sat rupam, because the second and third persons, including thoughts, are alien or external to us. Our attention paid to them was of the nature of a doing, kriya. But this very attention, when fixed on the non-alien first-person feeling I, loses the nature of paying and remains in the form of being, and therefore it is of the nature of non-doing, akriya, or inaction, nishkriya. So long as our power of attention was dwelling upon second and third persons, it was called the mind or the intellect, and its attending was called a doing, kriya, or an action, karma. Only that which is done by the mind is an action. But on the other hand, as soon as the attention is fixed on the first person or self, it loses its mean names such as mind, intellect, or ego sense. Moreover, that attention is no longer even an action, but inaction, a karma, or the state of being still, summa irutal. Therefore, the mind, which attends to self, is no more the mind. It is the consciousness aspect of self, atma chit rupam. Likewise, so long as it attends to the second and third persons, the world, it is not the consciousness aspect of self. It is the mind. the reflected form of consciousness, chit abhasa rupam. Hence, since self-attention is not a doing, kriya, it is not an action, karma. That is, self alone realizes self. The ego does not. The mind which has obtained a burning desire for self-attention, which is self-enquiry, is said to be the fully mature one, bhakva manas, since it is not at all now inclined to attend to any second or third person. It can be said that it has reached the pinnacle of desirelessness, vairagya, or do not all sorts of desires and attachments pertain only to second and third persons? Since this mind, which has very well understood that, as already seen in the earlier chapters, the consciousness which shines as I alone is the source of full and real happiness, now seeks self because of its natural craving for happiness. This intense desire to attend to self is indeed the highest form of devotion, bhakti. It is exactly this self-attention of the mind, which is thus fully mature through such devotion and desirelessness, bhakti vairagya, that is to be called the inquiry Who am I, taught by Bhagavan Sri Ramana. Well, will not at least such a mature mind, which has come to the path of Sri Ramana, willingly agree to engage in self-attention, realize self? No, it has started for its doom. Agreeing to commit suicide, it places its neck through self-attention on the scaffold where it is to be sacrificed. How? Only so long as it was attending to second and third persons did it have the name mind. But as soon as self-attention is begun, its name and form, its name as mind and its form as thoughts are lost. So we can no longer say that self-attention or self-inquiry is performed by the mind. Neither is it the mind that attends to self, nor is it the natural spontaneous self-attention of the consciousness aspect of self, atma chit rupam, which is not the mind, an activity. A naked lie, then, it would be, if any man were to say that he realized the self diving within through proper inquiry set in, not for knowing, but for death, the good-for-nothing ego's worth, this Arunachala alone, the self, by which the self is known. Sri Arunachala Venba, verse 39. The feeling I am is the experience common to one and all. In this M is consciousness or knowledge. This knowledge is not of anything external. It is the knowledge of oneself. This chit, this consciousness is we. We are verily consciousness, says Sri Bhagavan in Upadesa Unhiyar, verse 23. This is our being. That is our true existence, or sat. This is called that which is, uladu. Thus, in I am, I is existence, sat, and M is consciousness, chit. When self, our nature of existence, consciousness, sat chit swarupam, instead of shining only as the pure consciousness I am, shines mixed with an adjunct, upadi. As I am a man, I am Rama, I am so-and-so, I am this or that. Then this mixed consciousness is the ego. This mixed consciousness can rise only by catching hold of a name and form. When we feel I am a man, I am Rama, I am sitting, I am lying, is it not clear that we have mistaken the body for I, and that we have assumed its name and postures as I am this and I am thus? The feeling this and thus, which has now risen mixed with the pure consciousness I am, Sat-Chit, is what is called thought. This is the first thought. The feeling I am a man, I am so-and-so, is only a thought. But the consciousness I am is not a thought. It is the very nature of our being. The mixed consciousness, I am this or that, is a thought which rises from our being. It is only after the rising of this thought, the mixed consciousness, the first person, that all other thoughts, which are the knowledge of second and third persons, rise into existence. Only if the first person exists will the second and third persons exist. Uladu Narpadu, verse 14. The mixed consciousness, the first person, is called our rising or the rising of the ego. This is the primal mentation adivritti. Hence, thinking is a mentation vritti. Being is not a mentation. Atma vichare patikam, verse 1. The pure existence consciousness I am is not a thought. This consciousness is our nature, swarupam. I am a man is not our pure consciousness. It is only our thought. To understand thus the difference between our being and our rising, that is, between existence and thought, first of all, is essential for aspirants who take to the inquiry, who am I? Bhagavan Sri Ramana has advised that self-enquiry can be done either in the form, who am I, or in the form, whence am I? Hearing these two interrogative sentences, many aspirants have held various opinions about them till now and have become confused as to which of them is to be practiced and how. Even among those who consider that both are one and the same, many have only a superficial understanding and have not scrutinized deeply how they are the same. Some who try to follow the former one, who am I, simply begin either vocally or mentally the parrot-like repetition, who am I, who am I, as if it were a mantra japa. This is utterly wrong. Doing japa of who am I in this manner is just as bad as meditating upon or doing japa of the Mahavakyas such as I am Brahman and so on, thereby spoiling the very objective for which they were revealed. Sri Bhagavan himself has repeatedly said, who am I is not meant for repetition japa. Some others, thinking that they are following the second interrogative form, whence am I, try to concentrate on the right side of the chest where they imagine something as a spiritual heart, expecting a reply such as, I am from here. This is in no way better than the ancient method of meditating upon any one of the 6 yogic centers, chakras, in the body. For is not thinking of any place in the body only a second-person attention, an objective attention? Before we start to explain the technique of self-enquiry, is it not of the utmost importance that all such misconceptions be removed? Let us see, therefore, how they may be removed. In Sanskrit, the terms Atman and Aham both mean I. Hence, Atmavichara means an attention-seeking. Who is this I? It may rather be called I-attention, self-attention, or self-abidance. The consciousness I, thus pointed out here, is the first person feeling. But as we have already said, it is to be understood that the consciousness, mixed with adjuncts such as I am this or I am that, is the ego, ahankara, or the individual soul, jiva, whereas the unalloyed consciousness devoid of adjuncts and shining alone as I, or I am that I am, is self, Atman, the absolute Brahman or God Ishwara. Does it not amount to saying that the first person consciousness I can be either the ego or self, since all people generally take the ego feeling, I am the body, to be I. The ego is also given the name self, Atman, and is called individual self, Jivatma, by some Shastras even now. It is only for this reason that even the attention to the ego, what is it or who is it, is also named by the Shastras as self-enquiry, Atma Vichara. Is it not clear, however, that self, the existence consciousness, neither needs to do any inquiry nor can be subjected to any inquiry? It is just in order to rectify this defect that Bhagavan Ramana named it, Who am I? Rather than using the ancient term self-enquiry, Atma Vichara. The ego, the feeling of I, generally taken by people to be the first-person consciousness, is not the real first-person consciousness. Self alone is the real first-person consciousness. The ego feeling, which is merely a shadow of it, is a false first-person consciousness. When one inquires into this ego, what is it or who is it? What it is or who it is, it disappears, because it is really non-existent, and the inquirer, having nothing more to do, is established in self as self. Because it rises springing up from self, the false first-person consciousness mentioned above has to have a place and a time of rising. Therefore the question, whence am I, means only whence, from where does the ego rise. A place of rising can only be for the ego. But for self, since it has no rising or setting, there can be no particular place or time. When scrutinized, we, the ever-known existing thing, alone are. Then where is time and where is space? If we are mistaken to be the body, we shall be involved in time and space. But are we the body? Since we are the one, now and then and ever, that one in space, here, there, and everywhere, we, the timeless, spaceless self, alone are. Uladu Narpadu, verse 15. Thus says Sri Bhagavan. Therefore inquiring, whence am I, is inquiring, whence is the ego? Only to the rising of the ego, which is conditioned by time and space, would the question, whence am I, be applicable. The meaning which Sri Bhagavan expects us to understand from the term whence, or from where, is from what. When taken in this sense, instead of a place or time coming forth as a reply, self-existence, we, the thing, Vastu, alone, is experienced as the reply. If, on the other hand, we anticipate a place as an answer to the question whence, a place conditioned by time and space will be experienced within the body 2 digits to the right from the center of the chest, as said in Uladu Narpadu Anubandham, verse 18. Yet this experience is not the ultimate or absolute one, Paramartikam, for Sri Bhagavan has positively asserted that heart, Hridayam, is verily self-consciousness, which is timeless, spaceless, formless, and nameless. He who thinks that self or heart is within the insentient body, while in fact the body is within self, is like one who thinks that the screen which supports the cinema picture is contained within the picture. Ekatma Panchakam, verse 3. Finding a place in the body as the rising point of the ego in reply to the question whence is not the objective of Sri Bhagavan's teachings, nor is it the fruit to be gained by self-enquiry. Sri Bhagavan has declared clearly the objective of his teachings and the fruit to be gained by seeking the rising place of the ego as follows. Whence, when sought within, what is the place from which it rises as I, the ego, will die? This is self-enquiry. Jnana vichara. Upadesa Undhiyar, verse 19. Therefore, the result which is aimed at when seeking the rising place of the ego is the annihilation of that ego and not an experience of a place in the body. It is only in reply to the immature people who, not able to have even an intellectual understanding, paroksha jnana, about the nature of self which shines alone as the one non-dual thing, unlimited by, indeed, absolutely unconnected with, time and space, unlimited even in the form Brahman is everywhere, Brahman is at all times, Brahman is everything, Sarvatra Brahma, Sarvada Brahma, Sarvan Brahma, always raise the question, where is the seat for self in the body? That the Shastras and sometimes even Sri Bhagavan had to say, 2 digits to the right, from the center of the chest, is the heart. Hence this heart place, Hridaya Sthanam, is not the ultimate or absolute reality. The reader may here refer to Maharishi's Gospel, Book 2, Chapter 4. The heart is the self. Thus, attending to oneself in the form whence am I is inquiring into the ego, the rising I. But while inquiring who am I, there are some aspirants who take the feeling I to be their being, existence, and not their rising. If it is taken thus, that is attention to self. It is just to understand clearly the difference between these two forms of inquiry that the difference between our rising and our being has been explained earlier in this chapter. Just as the correct meaning of the term meditation upon Brahman, Brahmadvayanam, used by the Shastras up till now is explained by Sri Bhagavan in the last 2 lines of the first benedictory verse of Uladu Narpadu, to be, abiding in the heart as it is, that is to say, abiding as self, is the correct way of meditating upon it. So also the correct meaning of the term self-enquiry, Atma Vichara, is here rightly explained to be turning selfwards, or attending to self. In either of these 2 kinds of inquiry, who am I or whence am I, since the attention of the aspirant is focused only on himself, nothing other than self, Atman, which is the true import of the word I, will be finally experienced. Therefore, the ultimate result of both the inquiries, whence am I and who am I, is the same. How? He who seeks whence am I is following the ego, the form of which is I am so-and-so, and while doing so, the adjunct so-and-so, having no real existence, dies on the way, and thus he remains established in self, the surviving I am. On the other hand, he who seeks who am I drowns effortlessly in his real natural being, self, whichever shines as I am that I am. Therefore, whether done in the form whence am I or who am I, what is absolutely essential is that self-attention should be pursued till the very end. Moreover, it is not necessary for sincere aspirants even to name beforehand the feeling I, either as ego or as self. For are there two persons in the aspirant, the ego and self? This is said because since every one of us has the experience, I am one only and not two, we should not give room to an imaginary dual feeling, one I seeking for another, by differentiating ego and self as lower self and higher self. Are there two selves, one to be an object known by the other? For the true experience of all is I am one. Uladu Narpadu, verse 33. Ask Sri Bhagavan. Thus it is sufficient if we cling to the feeling I uninterruptedly till the very end. Such attention to the feeling I, the common daily experience of everyone, is what is meant by self-attention. For those who accept as their basic knowledge the I am the body consciousness, Jiva Bhaval, being unable to doubt the ego's existence, it is suitable to take to self-attention, that is, to do self-enquiry in the form, whence am I? On the other hand, for those who, instead of assuming that they have an individuality, Jiva Bhava, such as I am so-and-so or I am this, attend thus. What is this feeling which shines as I am? It is suitable to be fixed in self-attention in the form who am I? What is important to be sure of during practice sadhana is that our attention is turned only towards I, the first person singular feeling.